and pruning the garden of our lives, right? And through this, we will find that some things, some people aren't what are good and healthy in our lives, just like the weeds, just like overhanging brush and stuff in our lives. And it's necessary to have controlled burns in a natural environment. It's important to, be able to take and clip any of our dead and dying plants off. There's a thing called deadheading for a reason. And when you do that, say to calendula or marigold or anything like that, it promotes more growth. So that's what I really want to focus on as we talk about boundaries and why it's important for self-care and cultivating our personal garden. Because when we have all of these things that are pulling our energy, then we're no longer able to show up the way in the most healthy way, in the most vibrant way. And so it's important that we establish those healthy boundaries, and that will also allow us to increase self-awareness, reduce stress along the way, and overall just have better well-being and fulfillment in our lives. Um, so why is that necessary? And we can have boundaries in a garden. Maybe we've lined our garden beds with bricks, or we've created raised beds in our actual gardens. And it's the same way, like if you have mint or anything that you've planted, it's going to spread rapidly and continue going. It tunnels underneath, and the roots themselves spread out. So it can be a very invasive type of plant, even though it's helpful and it's beautiful and it smells wonderful. You might not want it completely filling your whole entire bed. So I've even seen some gardeners actually take and bury a pot and put the mint inside of that. That way it keeps it a little more contained, a little more under control. And you might want to do that with people and things in your life. Same thing with, you might not want to mix hostas with your yarrow or something like that. And I could continue going on and on and on about different plants, because there's a lot of very invasive things. Like right now I'm in a battle with ivy that keeps encroaching into my meditation garden area and everything, and the tree limbs are creating too much shade and stuff. So I've actually moved most of my herbs out into brighter, sunnier areas, and that I've created more of a little enclave out behind the garage studio and stuff. So think about that. Why do we edge our garden beds? Why do we create raised gardens and stuff like that? And it's to prioritize the needs of the plants and the space, and to beautify it in a lot of ways, right? So having that self-awareness for yourself is also very, very necessary. And one of the things is, a lot of times when we are going through and we found a boundary that we need to enact, whether it's from those who pull our energy, are always only reaching out when they need something, or they're the only ones like hogging all of your time. You found that all of your energy has been pulled in that direction. Sometimes it's necessary if you have kids or if you have parents that require a lot of care, but it's also important, to be able to take care of yourself, because we're not going to be able to show up as caregivers if we're not nourishing ourselves in the same way, right? Same thing with work. If your work or your business, if you're an entrepreneur, is taking all of your time and you're not able to have the buoyancy you need to um, be able to have the stressful situations come through that life is going to throw at us. It's sort of an inevitable. It can cause a lot of problems. So you definitely want to be able to take and put in, okay, this is a time boundary. I do not check work emails after 6 o'clock. I do not answer my phone on the weekends, stuff like that, especially if you have different apps and everything on your phone. You feel like you're in a constant on-call state, right? And this can even be if you're an entrepreneur. With me, I have design programs and recording programs and all of the social media apps on my phone, and I have to put very strong boundaries around that, or I'm going to easily get distracted when I'm spending time with my friends and family. Or I'll, oh, hold on, I just need to, answer this email really quick. And that can make the people in your lives feel like you're not prioritizing them. And I know that that's something I have lived in a state of urgency for a long time. And it's hard to enact those things, especially it's one of those habits that you have to just keep building on and repeating, especially if you have been a people pleaser most of your life and have always dropped everything to help others, or you've prioritized your, showing up as the best employee. But then you might not have been if you're not finding reciprocation, if they're not acknowledging all of your hard work, they're just using you, right? So you really want to assess all of that. And that's what I really like this period of time. If we're looking at the wheel of the year and sort of the theoretical symbolism that is so active in the seasons. And of course, being in different areas of the world, it can change, but we actually have, if we pay attention to it, there's a little bit of this in every single quarter. And the way that we look at it can have vastly different ways that shows up by the seasons. So that's one of the reasons why you might hear me repeating, and it builds upon each other, but then we're also faced with different situations and scenarios throughout the season. So like something that's happening right now may not be relevant in December when it's colder and we're experiencing all the winter holidays. Whereas, like then we might be having more family obligations and work obligations to go party and celebrate and stuff like that. Whereas right now, it's not necessarily a holiday oriented thing, but it's a summer oriented thing and all of the things that come with that, right? So maybe you're going out to the lake and spending time at a cookout, or you're going over to a friend's pool or something like that. Your schedule can get just jam packed. So that's why I wanted to talk about, there are these dualities and there are similarities throughout each of the seasons. And then there's also, polar opposites in a lot of ways. And I honestly see that more with spring and fall, because with spring, we're gaining something, we're growing, we're fertile and everything. And then in autumn, things start dying away and fading away, right? We've harvested everything. And that's similar to how summer and winter happen. We're very warm, we're very active, and then in the winter we have a lot of or we should have a lot more introspection and stuff like that. But in modern society, it's almost they've almost completely become equals in a lot of ways, because we're not no longer acknowledging winter for the time of rejuvenation and rest that it used to be. It, by necessity, especially in agrarian cultures, you know, you had to live by the seasons. And now everything's commercialized, everything's, fed by capitalism. And so we're always in a constant go, go, go. So using these natural cycles to sort of set us up a map, so to speak, or outline of how we can sort of place our boundaries in our life, or organize, and sort of use it as an example of how we can show up, can help. The cats are literally running through the house like crazy right now. So I'm a little bit scattered. I don't know if that made sense, but please, if you need me to clarify, I always start most of my classes when I'm teaching with a disclaimer that I'm very Southern. I might have weird, explanations for things that don't apply to anybody else in the world. And I also, with the neurodivergency and aphasia and stuff that I experience, I might not make sense at all in a stream of, like going point A to point B in a sentence or a paragraph. So, I'll try to bring it back as well as I can. But, if something doesn't seem clear ever, I'm not going to take offense to it, because that just means that you took a tidbit of the information and it got your interest, it aligned, and you're just like, okay, where did that squirrel path, as I call them, where did that squirrel path go? So if one of my squirrel paths goes off in a weird direction and doesn't circle back around, or goes on too many rants and tangents, just let me know and I'll try to clarify a little bit better. But anyway, what can boundaries look like? Since we've sort of talked about how the wheel of the year can indicate, and why I'm talking about summer being a time of pruning and taking care of the garden of our life, right? So some of these boundaries can look like, you know, saying, I'm not going to be able to meet you this month, or I um I need some space for myself, especially in a personal relationship, or if you have kids or something like that, you might be like, hey, can your parents maybe take the kids once a month, or some friends, or maybe your partner is watching them one evening while you go have a night away or something like that. And that being able to have that ebb and flow, and all of the responsibility not just being on one person, is very, very vital. And the same thing happens, within the professional setting. You really need to, you know, make sense, or set boundaries about when you're going to show up. And that is across the board, really. Like I was saying, if you're using the same phone for work as you are for personal, having an app or something that times off everything that you no longer need to use, or turn off notifications. That's one of the things I had to do. I to just ease me into being able to not open a certain message at a certain time. Sometimes message, or people will message you in a tizzy, and as a people pleaser, it was always, I had to solve their problem right then, and it would take me out of being able to teach properly. Like my students, I would need to be demonstrating, but yet I was answering someone's text message and helping them. And so it's like prioritizing the thing that you need to hold a container around at the time. And then, okay, or even when you don't have mental space to embrace and hold space for that other person, then not opening a message from that said person is very vital in how you respond, even because you might be terse or short with someone when they're asking for help, and it's because you're feeling defensive of your time and you're not able to provide the space holding that you need for that person. So if you know that that person is sort of like a at flight risk or something, don't always open their messages immediately. And if it's like a long line of text that you're not able to comprehend and hold space for at the moment, don't read it. Just close it. Like, whoops, I opened that can of worms and I'm going to just slowly back out. And that's okay. If those boundaries start being challenged at any point in time, then that's that person's problem, not you, if that makes sense. Like if someone is constantly, come over, I need, I want you to come over. That's great. But if you need to prioritize homework or working on your business or something like that, say, right now is not a good time. Can we schedule for blah, blah, blah when it's a better time for me? There's no one in your life that should be like, this needs to happen right now. Does that make sense? If there is, that's a huge red flag, okay? And usually, what I've found is these people that are like, I need your help, I need your help. They'll find a solution if you give them enough time. And that's another form of having a boundary, is let this just sit for a minute, or a day or 2 days or maybe a week, and then come back to it. And probably by then, just, say, hi, apologies, my life's been busy, I've been having it. And you don't even have to tell them every reason. You don't have to defend why you weren't there, Johnny on the spot, right? All you have to do is say, apologies for my late response. Do you still need assistance with this? Or, provide your insight at that time and then move on. But there is no reason why you need to respond immediately. I mean, your highest priorities in an emergency situation are going to be yourself, your closest family members, and those you take care of. And so, yes, if those people are on speed dial, if those people are able to call through, that's fine. Because, if they're on the side of the road and they need medical assistance or something like that, more than likely you're not the one that they should be calling first anyway. But those are your core people that you need to take care of. Anybody else is going to be absolutely fine, and they'll probably have 5 other people that they can turn to. you know just keep that in mind when you're dealing with pressure and stuff like that. So this wasn't as clear as I wanted to talk about. Um, um, but I feel like that got on some major portions of it. Is just, you need to have boundaries. What kind of boundaries can you put in place around what? Personal relationships, friend relationships, even your pets. Like my cat running around, he's been begging for love. He doesn't get that right now. He might get a pat on the head or whatever as he passes by, but I'm focused on work right now, and then I'll take time to pet and love. Having those kind of boundaries, and then having them in your workplace as well, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're, in corporate America or something like that. It's super important. And when you start having backlash, you know, mostly just don't take it personally. That's the big thing. It's going to happen. You shouldn't be shamed for having boundaries. And if it gets to the point where, you've said, hey, you know, I've noticed that this continues to be a problem. You keep knocking down my wall and just barging through, and I'm not feeling good about this right now. Have that conversation. That's part of having boundaries and actually building them up, because it may be something that someone's never even thought about, and they might not understand. Hey, you've suddenly put on the brakes without any explanation. They never saw their actions as being intrusive, right? So it might be a learning space for them. Don't go into that triggered at all. Not a good way of doing this. It's all about learning to live from a space of love, but not being a doormat, if that makes sense. So especially with family members and stuff, when they're starting to be like, why aren't you answering my text? Why have you not talked to me today? Or, why haven't you come home for a holiday in so many years? You don't necessarily owe them an explanation, but if you deem it important and it's a recurring issue and you want to try to forgive and rebuild, try to have those conversations. I'll be talking about that a little bit more, because there are ways to have compassionate conversations, and sometimes it's just listening, and sometimes it's being able to judge whether you can make change in that person's life and whether they'll hear you. So that's one of the biggest things, because you want to maintain, or rather than maintain, you want to have sustainability, because maintaining is not great. You want to be able to have sustainability and fulfillment. And so you do that by nurturing those healthy boundaries. I think that pretty much covers everything. Let me know in the comments if you have been challenged, if you're having issues right now with making boundaries, where to even start. I'm happy to answer questions, and that might pose a totally new conversation in this that is more honed in on your actual needs or something like that. So definitely drop them in the comments, shoot me a message privately. I'm more than happy to talk about it, because if we're not creating a sanctuary for ourselves in our lives, no one else is going to. Same way as we have to be our biggest cheerleaders, right? We have to be our biggest advocates as well. We have to, put in these boundaries, as well as as well as cheering ourselves on, because that's how we fully embrace this journey to authenticity and living joyfully and full of life and love and all the ways that we want to show up. Okay. So definitely let me know what you think, how you've experienced this in your life and whatnot. Okay. So I will talk to you later. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.